on the one hand, it felt very, ego James knew what he wanted and had a conceptual map for this and knew what trajectory I was going in and could guide it. But the actual process was one of passivity, of surrender, of opening, and so it's more of a, kind of getting out of your own way. Um, yeah, so you have, and it's not just psychedelics. I mean, so an interesting thing is, as I said, you can be completely have all this embodied stress, feel fundamentally afraid, have faced and continue to face challenges. Me at the age of 13, and yet you can still connect with this fact of being. You can get out of a mindset of doing and just exist in the present moment. It's possible, but again, it's not going to be very integrated and sustained, and your behavior is likely to come out in unconscious neurotic ways. You see kind of abuse in from spiritual teachers and stuff like that. It's very possible to have these insights and be deeply unintegrated and to then act out in pathological ways. Um, and then for me, then there was a process of, okay, uh, you've got this kind of awakened perspective, but then it keeps collapsing back into an ego, and it's not sustainable, or it's not, yeah, it's not sustained being in that one, in the kind of awakened state. So then the process for me was, how do I get this organism to be, again, like a Taoist kind of conception of a thing that's just the unfolding with the flowing of the river with no interference from the ego and from with the sphere stuff. And so one thing is you physiologically start to open yourself up with psychedelics is one way that I have done it. Even just massage, like I had a masseuse who would massage my stomach in this way that was really, I mean, it was so deep and intense and confronting to be prodded very deeply in your stomach. There's all this kind of soft muscle fascia where you carry all of your emotional reactivity, and that was incredibly powerful. That also allowed me to drop down another level with this stuff. This is why yoga is a spiritual tradition, because it allows you to move into this, yoga meaning union, into this state of mystical kind of non-dual insight. Um, and so there are lots of different ways to do it, but for me, it's about bringing this organism into alignment with the unfolding of the world. And even when you're doing meditation or something you conceptualize as mental, we know that there are new physiological changes going along that underpin different changes in consciousness, different changes in your habitual mental patterns. So the whole process is one of being a physical thing that is becoming into alignment with the bottom up kind of flowering in existence rather than this egoic interfering, um, which is often how we live our lives.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what role kind of your sharings online and just even us having this conversation that plays in your life in terms of this process.
Yeah,
And yeah.
that's a great question. I've not been asked before, but it's definitely part of the process. So I've always had a deep instinct uh, to try to help. I guess I think service is the kind of the ultimate good, like to spend your life on. And you could say that comes from a basic human instinct or a basic living thing instinct of empathy, of seeing other things like me that suffer and wanting to help relieve suffering. There could be an extent to which it comes from a neurotic place of projecting my own suffering of, but I feel like that's not so much part of it, because I try to bring to awareness if that's an aspect of it. So I think it's yeah, so that's why I do it. But then the actual project of it as well, another benefit I get from it is it keeps me it keeps me going on this path, because it can be confronting to put yourself out there in a public way. Can bring up, again, as social primates, interpersonal anxieties. A lot of people are terrified of public speaking. I've not been that I've never been had that much of a problem with public speaking, but it can still it can still bring up concerns of, yeah, egoic concerns of how you're perceived and how you're what people think of you, if you're making sense. And so I think when I first started doing it, it was a really helpful way for me to feel what would come up when I would do these things, and almost just to challenge myself, put myself in a position that some people were just like, no way, I'm not going to do that, it's too scary. But instead, to put myself in those positions and then be like, okay, what do I need to do to feel, um, to feel that I can navigate this well. And actually, that's the other point I should have said when I was talking about how you, in an embodied way, can come more into alignment with this absolute perspective. A big part of it is it's not just about passively opening yourself and surrendering and that stuff. You know, as I indicated before, that happens in parallel with a process of empowerment where you're actually, you know, as well as being uh, this kind of flowering of the universe, you also do have the capacity to make decisions. You are an agent, and so you you learn to develop skills and to resource yourself and become aware of what's going on in your world. And through that process, you learn to trust yourself, not just trust yourself again, like blindly, but to really think like, okay, I've really got my own back here. I know how to look after myself. Self care is another part of this. You know, deprogramming yourself from societal narratives that prevent you from doing that, and so that's another kind of important part of this process. Uh, yeah, that might have taken a spell off topic from your question
Off
there.
topic's fine. I'm kind of a little bit more curious in this direction. So when we're talking about this kind of these things that come up for you in terms of the sharings, like certain vulnerabilities and emotional knots that still kind of arise maybe through the process of that participation or that service. Yeah, this is kind of matching to what we were talking about earlier around the masks, and I've thought about this, and it seems like yeah, it's something that has made me personally feel quite reluctant in certain arenas to be sharing more is the idea of like layering more masks on rather than removing them. And
Oh,
I was
interesting.
wondering, yeah, what you see about that, and if you see that happening, or you just feel like the
Yeah,
just the dance back and forth allows you to kind of somehow halt that process. I'm not sure.
that's really interesting. I'm not sure if this is what you meant by it, but what it brings up for me is that there are certain things of like, you know, when I point to emotional challenge, like challenges in youth that led to these uh, to my needing to engage in kind of trauma healing work, I often hold back from going into details there because I feel like by being truthful, sometimes what that might serve to do is actually to put on a mask. So
Hmm.
if I emphasize that I come from a kind of working class background and had it, you know, hard in that way, then is that coming from a place of truth? Because when I say it, actually, what it feels like is I'm almost trying to be like, so you should think of me in this, you should like, I
Yeah,
don't know.
it's like transparency that's not quite transparent or something.
Exactly. It's like a manipulative, it's almost like I want you to think of me as, oh, isn't he impressive for like having transcended like a
Sure.
difficult circumstance? So that's interesting. I've not heard someone, I don't know if that's what you meant by it, but that, yeah, when you said that it feels like you're layering on masks, yeah, I notice that as well. But then in that way, I guess this is kind of what I meant before when truthfulness uh, isn't just about the statements you make, because like while that's a literally true statement, you know, I was saying like in your posturing, the way you present yourself, the effects you want to have on people, that's where we're really talking about transparency and
Mm.
I mean, again, maybe connection really is the ultimate thing we're talking about here, because if I say something that's technically true, but it's because I want to achieve a certain uh, mind state in you with regards to me, then there's an attempt to control. There's an attempt to make you different somehow to what you are, or to stop this process from being as authentic and as connected and as transparent as it is. So I think yeah, connection is perhaps a deeper principle than even truth. Um, yeah.
And yeah, no, I'm watching kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. It seems like there's a light that's being shone on the motions in your life, and I've thought about this recently. Just probably conducting some kind of a possibly conducting some kind of experiment where I just kind of name kind of reasons I'm doing every single thing for a whole day or something, or maybe even just for an hour or a week, possibly. Who knows? But this kind of um, naming and ritualizing, I guess, every single action I thought would be an interesting experiment. Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
In a way to yourself to be transparent with what's happening.
Yeah. To kind of be able to kind of see and direct in a different way and to see what would come out of that if there would be any noticings, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's funny. The way that I tend to think about uh, this kind of non-dual insight stuff is that the world itself is not conceptual, and the reason you point that out is because we typically see through our concepts. We use language, and I think this is a cup that I'm drinking from. Uh, but then actually, if I were to interrogate, well, what is cupness, or what is it for something to be a cup? What you realize is there is no essence of cup in it. It's a kind of relational descriptor for something I can drink from. It's a cup when I say it's a cup, basically, and everything's like that. Really, it's
Mm-hmm.
nothing
Yeah.
intrinsically is anything. It's language is a way of signifying and chunking things into concept and discriminating. And when you get rid of that discriminating, then that's when you fall into this mindset of just awe at everything existing in this like, well, it's actually not split into different things. I'm interdependent on everything else. It's a whole
Yeah.
unnameable thing. And so um, I remember as a teenager, I was very into nature, still am, and I wanted to learn about all the different flowers, but I really didn't want to learn their names because I felt quite vividly that I
Mm.
liked to behold things just as they were. And if I could say, oh, yeah, that's a whatever, silver mallow or something, like,
Take that away.
uh, then you've just, yeah, ticked it off, and I can just kind of move on with my day. And even just at a subtle level, even if I'm there and I'm trying to engage with it, I feel like concepts take us away from direct experience. Um, yeah, so then I have a slight aversion to using language, like in any kind of practice around what you might call spiritual stuff. So when people do like noting, um, you know, or counting the breath, anything that's conceptual, feels to me like it's moving in the wrong direction. I quite like something people can play around with is to get into this state of non-dual awareness of just being, which is what it is one way is kind of awareness of awareness. I would say that's not a way to describe the end goal, but it's a way you can try to like bootstrap yourself into this state of just getting out of thought and just being. And then one way you can become aware of the kind of spacious awareness in which everything arises in your experience is to use a mantra that's intentionally a nonsense sound. So blah would be a kind of conventional one, but even that has, I guess, has a sense of meaning. But just saying something like that, and again, it's nice because it doesn't have a conceptual meaning. Um, and then just hearing this, thinking it in your mind, hearing it as a sound, and then noticing the space in which it arises. That's a great practice to just kind of to suddenly go, wait a minute, I'm not the thing that's saying the word blah. There's just there's a spaciousness, and the word blah is arising, and everything's just arising in this spacious awareness that's just here now. And then the end goal, these are still concepts. The end goal is just to be and just truly let go into a state of what you might call non-meditation, where you're just being, just sitting like this in Zen. Um, yeah, that's the main kind of practice. I mean, not the mantra thing, but just getting into that state of just being, for me, is my main practice.